Okay, well, here we are on the Psychology of Retention and How to Retain Top Talent workshop. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is a workshop on keeping top talent engaged, loyal, and performing at their best. Okay, so why are you here? So you're noticing maybe that good employees are leaving too soon. Staffing has been a general issue, right, in manufacturing and other fast-paced industries. You may be in leadership and you have some managers that are stretched thin. Maybe you are one of those. You're experiencing or you have experienced burnout. Um, there is some disengagement in your team or your managers, and you are looking for a more effective strategy or different input, and you need a proven system. Any other reasons why you're here? Anything that caught your eye, if you want to, share on the chat, I would welcome that just to see what, people are excited about and talking about. I know a lot of my posts are around, how can we bring a leadership that focuses on well-being, that focuses on effective strategies where we're taking care and growing our people and supporting ourselves as well. So I always like to hear what resonates with folks. So the cost of poor retention. So it is so, I don't have to tell you, right? It so much loss of productivity and the constant turnover and the burnout for those who stayed and pick up the pieces. You know, just all the costs that come with recruiting and training and staffing and having that gap in between. I mean, it can be quite exhausting. And the what I have come to realize in my experience is that retention is a psychological issue about how people feel at work. And it is beyond metrics, it's beyond systems, it's definitely it's something that you feel, right? It affects the culture so much because when you start to see good people that leave, right? Good talent, or even nothing outstanding when it comes to talents, but just people just leaving and leaving. And it becomes very difficult to to fill those gaps, and people start to question like what's going on? Why are people leaving? And you start to pick up on certain leadership issues and broken processes and all these different things. It adds a lot of stress. It can be very stressful. So it definitely impacts us in a very psychological way, emotionally, even, I would say, because it is frustrating and it's exhausting. So imagine if you have a culture where employees speak up, they contribute ideas, they trust their leaders. The growth is visible, right? You hire people and you see this very clear path of moving up or being involved, and it aligns with people's strengths, right? They are being seen because their talents are being recognized and utilized, and your turnover over time drops. And you see that morale, that team cohesion just really come together. And wouldn't that be the ideal place to work, where you just walk in, you go in, do your job, you feel good, you maybe you have some friendships at work, you learn things and you get to go home and you can close the door and leave the stress at work and go home and then come back the next day and do it all over again with a smile on your face. I mean, wouldn't that be just the ideal place? And my why, for me, this is such an important topic because I have experienced burnout myself. And it, the first time around that it happened for me, I have overall about 15 years of experience of combined clinical mental health work and HR management. And when I experienced burnout the first time, it was very early on in my career. I worked in when I started working in manufacturing, I worked for this amazing organization that was experienced very rapid growth, and I just, I still consider myself an ambitious person, but back then I was just really just excited to grow and work hard and prove myself. And I definitely experienced burnout myself. And I experienced burnout almost a second time again later on in my career. And I have come to realize that burnout, it's not just about the individual and it's not just about the leadership, but it's also about the systems that are not really designed to prioritize employee well-being and to prioritize well-being while the business is growing as well. And not to distract you all from this, but if you're seeing the 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 slides, there's a picture, and I used AI to generate the picture, and I just realized there's an extra hand on the form on the picture. I don't know if you see that, but anyways, it's pretty hilarious. But anyways, not to sidetrack too much because it's an important topic, but it's good to get some laughs sometimes. But yeah, I mean, isn't it amazing what AI can do? But also we don't need three hands, right? We got two are okay. I don't know if you see the picture, right? It's just she's going like this. But anyhow, so mental health training. This is so important to me because, I did start my journey, academically and professionally in psychology and in counseling, but I decided to go into business to HR. And I was kind of always like in between two worlds for me because I have a family that has a very much a entrepreneur spirit. My parents are immigrants, and they they moved to this country, and they build businesses. So a lot of my uncles and my aunts and my cousins, they all have their own business, and I became an entrepreneur myself over time. So I was just always curious about business, and so I went into manufacturing and other sectors, and I just always was gravitated to help people and work with people. And then I ended up going back to school to get an HR master's degree. And over time, I realized that I just wanted to learn more about the human condition. I was always gravitated towards the psychology, the behavioral people. And, it really came in handy when I was in business because, what can you do with business if you don't have people involved, right? I mean, innovation, having a community, personal growth, professional growth. It happens in a very special way when you're surrounded by qualified people, when you can learn from others. And so I ended up going back to school, and now I'm a licensed psychotherapist as well. And so mental health training, I guess what I'm trying to say is mental health training is so important because when we're in a busy setting in manufacturing, there's so much going on. There's so much stress. And to be honest with you, when I was an HR, professional on site, I sometimes felt like I was a therapist. I was like, the therapist on duty because, HR, right? Or a manager, for example, is someone who you go to when, you get a phone call and you find out, a family member has passed away and you're in shock. Or, the day before you went to a doctor's appointment and you found out that you had cancer and you had to come back, to work the next day like life is going on, and you have a lot of different issues involving anxiety, just life issues. Maybe someone's going through a divorce, whatever it is, and it affects your mental health. And so in general, leadership and HR professionals are not trained or not equipped to deal with some of these, issues, right, that people go through. And you, as an HR professional or as a leader, you're going through these things yourself, right? And so mental health training, it's just so important and has become more talked about, but I don't think it has been really broken through, especially not in manufacturing, as much as it really needs to. And I'll say kind of like to piggyback on that is that uh, alcohol abuse and drug abuse is also a really big issues in industries like manufacturing or construction. And so there is definitely a lot of correlation or, interaction between mental health and coping with alcohol and drugs. And so being being equipped about mental health is something obviously that I feel very passionate about, but I think it brings so much confidence to leadership when they have um, practices in place, when they have knowledge, when they have the language around what's what, so that they can support their employees. And you can humanize the experience of employees, but you can also, again, prioritize their well-being. And in my current practice, I work with individuals and I work with leaders and companies and solving real retention issues that are so related to the psychology of the workplace. Okay. Okay, so what are some common misconceptions? So people leave for more money. That's a huge one, right? And yes, compensation is definitely, I think, a reason for high turnover in certain industries, and it's definitely something that at times it is the top priority. But if you look at research, if you really look at the top, five or the top 10, money is actually not one of the more prevalent reasons why people leave their jobs. Most leave because they don't see a future, because there isn't, they don't see themselves growing with the company. They don't see a clear trajectory. There's some confusion in their role and where they're going with the company. Excuse me. So they want to find other opportunities where they can be seen. They can, really grow and provide for themselves and their family and achieve their goals. And another misconception is, there's no time for culture work. There's no time to, talk about well-being, or we'll do this, once a month in like some kind of I don't know, workshop or wellness day, or maybe we're doing a fair for a whole week, and that's it, right? And so however, we spend so many months at times replacing just one role. And the money that goes and the time that goes into, finding the right person to replace who we lost, right? And we do have time. If we have to have the time, because we can't continue to afford to spending so much time replacing someone. And the replacing a role and spending a lot of time in that, it's not just because there isn't necessarily, the right people available, right? There's so many other things, and I don't want to simplify that we're just wasting time trying to find the right person and we can't find the right person. It's not as simple as that. A lot of times is that we overcomplicate our hiring processes, but also it does take time to fill certain roles. And, part of that lack of simplicity and clarity around selection and hiring is one of the reasons why some of our employees that have to pick up the slack burnout. And, by the way, if you haven't signed up for my manufacturing mental health newsletter that I have on my LinkedIn, please subscribe to that. The latest edition, I share a story similar to what we're talking about here, how a manager, lost his director. His director put in his notice, and the manager had been with the company for many years and wanted to grow with the company, and worked really hard to prove himself. And things didn't go as planned, and it really affected his mental health. So if you want to read that story, if you want to learn more about that and some of the strategies that I share about mental health in the workplace, I welcome you to subscribe to that. So here's the last misconception here. Our industry has high turnover. Okay, so anybody who's here who's in the chat, if you could tell me what industry you're in, if you're in manufacturing or not. I wonder, because manufacturing has definitely a reputation for high turnover, right? And okay, so we got manufacturing people here. Awesome. And someone in food manufacturing, which has his own set of challenges with staffing. Not to say, the other manufacturers don't, but food manufacturing specifically also has a interesting set of challenges with turnover. I'll just say that yes, that's true. Honestly, statistically, the average, turnover rate, it's high. It's almost 40%. I mean, that's very high. And that's just the average. But just because there is a statistic and history around high turnover within the industry does not mean that that should be the norm, or that should be, the standard. With the right culture, people do stay and they do thrive. I worked with a company. I started working with this company who had about 10 to 12, I think it was, yeah, just a little bit over 10%, right? And I've worked with other companies that have 50, right? So the turnover rate within manufacturing can range, and I've seen it. I have seen companies that I have worked with that were like that before I started, that had a low turnover rate, and other ones that I helped turn things around by focusing on the right strategies and the right systems. And just because, and I know you've heard this, right? Tell me if you're in leadership. Tell me how long you've been in leadership as well. If you're here live, I would love to hear how many years you've been in leadership. Okay. 37. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So there's probably 37 years. So there's probably nothing that would surprise you at this point. You probably have heard quite a bit, right? Okay, so a few years as an HR manager, but in leadership role for over a decade. Yeah, so you have quite a lot of experience as well. And one of the things that you may hear when you're trying to be a change agent, right, is that um, this is how we've done it. This is how it's been. Tell me if that doesn't just frustrate you, right? Because here's the thing, just because we've done it this way doesn't mean it's going to always work. If you have high turnover and you've been doing these things so far, then you'll never improve your turnover rate, right? We can't continue to do the same things if it's just not working. So again, with the right culture, people do stay and thrive. And haven't you been in a situation where you love the people you work with, you love the product, you love what you do, but you just don't see any growth within that company, or your leadership, your senior leadership is not supporting you or seeing you or not backing you up when you're trying to focus on things that will support your team, right? It's so frustrating. All right. So, 4-part retention ready system. So this is one of these are 4 pillars here that I focus on, and I'm just a huge believer in. And one of the reasons why, I want to talk to you today is really to understand the psychological drivers of retention, what makes people stay. And I don't want to simplify this too much, but basically it comes down to how do they feel? How do they feel in your team, under your leadership, doing their job, walking down the hallway? Like, how do they feel? And how does that relate to who they are and their strengths and what they want in life? And basically, that comes down to three aspects: autonomy, purpose, and connection. And so do they have the ability to make decisions on their own, to give feedback, to speak up? Do they understand why their role is important? Do they feel that there's a teamwork, that they feel part of the team, that there's a space for them to be who they are and grow? And so um, all of these reasons combined helps them strengthen their sense of self, and their sense of self, for basically is their perception of themselves, right? What makes them them? So what makes you you, right? Your beliefs, your behavior, your upbringing, everything about you. That is your sense of self. And how strong your sense of self will be linked to your confidence level. So the more confident you are, the more certain you are about speaking up, about, um, understanding and being self-aware of your beliefs, and then being able to speak them out loud, right? To be able to say, wait a second, I don't feel right about this. I think that, if we go this, I'm just giving you a general example. Like if someone noticed something on the production line and, one of their values and one of the things that you really drive hard is quality control, quality assurance, having a good quality product. And someone in the chat here, in the workshop live, is in food manufacturing, and I know that I think in all manufacturers, right, the quality of your product is really important. But when it comes to food, there is also an aspect of, you know, life and death sometimes, right? Or illness. And so there is this not just an ethical concern, but there's this moral um, aspect of being concerned about quality. And so if you have an employee who feels very confident and very sure about speaking up and saying, there is a foreign material there, there's something that we didn't catch, we need to stop the line right away. If that's not encouraged, if that's kind of frowned upon, if that person feels like they're going to get in trouble by speaking up, by stopping something, um, they're going to feel a lot of self-doubt about how they believe or what they believe in and their actions. And so it's so, so important to bring that out in people, to let them know that they do have the autonomy to make decisions. But there's got to be, it's not just about talking about it, but you have to model that as a leader. And so then we go to leadership that listens, right? Kind of similar to what we were just talking about. And, you have to have those one-on-ones conversations, those team meetings where you are talking about what's important, about how are you ensuring that they understand the purpose of their role, that they feel connected between what's important to them and what the company is doing in their role, that there's space for recognition, that there is space for active listening. And active listening is not just about problems and solutions, of your operations, which is so important, but it's also about well-being and culture, and kind of tied to the next thing here, well-being and culture. And that psychological safety that you have to um, lead with, right? Where psychological safety is basically just allowing employees to speak up their mind, to feel comfortable, to not be afraid to make a mistake, to know that they're being treated as human beings. Of course, we're going to have accountability. Of course, we're going to have, processes in place to make sure that, we set a standard. But beyond that is how can we connect with our employees in a way that it is genuine and that we are prioritizing um, them, right? And how can we make this a sustainable system, a sustainable performance? And, I think well-being and culture for many years has been just something that has been kind of a fluff, right? Just something that we don't know what it is. We don't know how to measure it. We're not really sure. We're like, that's an HR thing, it can be. But the reality is that your culture, you know, it's not just about what you believe in, and it's not just about, the nice, colorful, you know, values, core values on the walls. That's all really pretty and nice, and that's great. Um, but for me, in my experience, culture, it's it's about your business strategy. And I know it might seem like it might be in contradiction to what we've been kind of talking about here, but the reason why I'm saying it's business strategy is because it really has to start with the vision. It has to start with a plan. And when you talk about culture in a way that is not, that you can't measure it, that you can't see it, it becomes so disconnected from the success of your team or your organization. And so it has to start with a good, clear strategy where we are focusing on well-being and culture in that business strategy or organizational development strategy, whatever you want to call it. And so the way that we do that is by how can we have a plan where if one of our goals is to improve our retention rate, if one of our goals is to do that, then how can we implement strategies that support that? And how do we measure that success? And so if we really want to see how well-being is working for us and how it can become part of our culture, we can't just have a well-being day a year. That's not possible, right? How can that be possible? If you focus on process improvement, if you focus on that, there's so many ways I'm sure your organization has or is focusing on that because it's part of just kind of how you want people to think about, their role, their production line, their team. What are we doing and how can we get better at minimizing waste, at being more effective and being more productive. And so if that's part of our business strategy, if that's part of our operations or everyday life, in production, then we have to make well-being and culture part of that as well. And the culture, it's just about how, it's about the behaviors, right? And so if your culture is very focused on process improvement, then that is part of the culture, right? That's who they are. So well-being needs to be part of that as well. Because if we're only focusing on, for our business strategy, if we're only focusing on process, we're leaving out a very crucial part of the equation, which is the humans, right? It's about how people feel. And talking about how people feel doesn't really fit into what we have come to know or what we feel comfortable when it comes to running a business. But we know, I mean, you're in leadership or you have people that report to you, and you know that ensuring that you take care of your people and knowing how they feel and knowing that they feel supported and valued, it's huge, is everything. Yeah. Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you're following along, if this is resonating with you, anything that's coming up to you. Okay, good. Thank you for the thumbs up. I appreciate it. All right. And so we have a self assessment, and I think everybody here on the call got the workbook, but I do have the list of questions here. So I just wanted to take just a few minutes to answer it. I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer it, but it is on page 2, self-assessment. So I'm gonna pause here for just a second. Pause the recording. Can you guys still hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Or did I just pause the sharing? Maybe I just paused the sharing. I didn't pause the recording, did I? Let me see. Yeah, I did. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's I would love to kind of do this together if we could. That could be helpful. So one of the first question is, and by the way, the rating is 1 to 5. 1 to 5, 1 being rarely and 5 frequently. So the first one, our leadership team actively listens to employee concerns. Okay, 1 to 5. Sorry, I'm smiling because I just realized that my 3-year-old must have gotten into my office and try to write on it, and I can't read one of the words here, so I have to look it up on the screen. Oh my goodness. This is the beauty of having a home office. You get individual contributors adding artwork to your notes. Anyways, okay, so our leadership team actively listens to employee concerns. All right. So this means that if you have people that report to you, right? If you want to look at it at within your team, but if you want to think about this in terms of your organization, it also applies as well. So think about that, 1 to 5. And then we provide, number 2 is we provide clear career development. I wrote this, so I should be able to remember. Pathways. Yeah, pathways is usually what I call it, development pathways. This is where my son kind of scribbled really hard and I can't see it. So we provide clear career development pathways. And this is not, well, most people that start as an operator become a, team lead, like not an assumption, not historically what has been done, but I am talking about a written career development pathway, a very clear way of, if people were interested in growing with the company, you can be like, this is how you do it. This is a handout. This is a information about it. These are the ways that you could. And that's what I mean. So how is that on 1 to 5? Okay. Number 3, recognition and appreciation are consistently given for good performance. 1 to 5. 1 being rarely and 5 frequently. Number 4, employees have the autonomy to make decisions in their roles. Number 5, our organizational values are communicated and aligned with daily operations. Number 6, we offer regular opportunities for professional growth and learning. Number 7, managers prioritize building relationships with their team members. Number 8, we gather and act on employee feedback. to improve workplace satisfaction. Notice that I wrote down gather and act, because a lot of times we're good at gathering information, doing surveys, and sometimes there's a bit of lack of follow-up or long delay or lack of communication sometimes, and how we act on gathering information. So consider all those factors when you're answering this. Number 9, our team culture encourages psychological safety. So meaning employees feel safe to voice opinions or admit mistakes without fear of negative consequences. And you may be thinking of your team, just your team, but if there is another team in your organization that you think is different, I will maybe make a note of that. We have number 10, we have strategies in place to prevent burnout and promote well-being. Okay. And if maybe there are strategies, but you don't know them very well, or they're not really communicated much or promoted, I would take that also into consideration in answering that. Okay. So I am going to take a quick minute break, and I'll let you add these up. And I'll be back in just a minute. I'm going to let you add that up. And then if you would like to share your score on the chat, that would be awesome. Okay, I'm back. Sure. I mean, you don't have to share if you don't want to. I would also welcome you scheduling a strategy call with me, and I am super happy to go over this with you and kind of have a deeper conversation about it one-on-one. But anyhow, I am I think it's always helpful to kind of stop and think about how this material, how this conversation applies to you and your organization, and getting some self-awareness, I think, because sometimes we're so in this very fast-paced environment that we're so used to being in the culture as well, right? What's next? What's next? What's next? What's the next thing? And so sometimes we need to really stop and evaluate our surroundings, or what's going on with us, and start from there versus what we want to attain, but rather meet ourselves where we're at. And so I really enjoy having my clients and anybody that I interact with in this kind of setting to just, I really encourage you to practice mindfulness in your leadership, because it helps you reflect in a more clear way. Okay, so let me look at the time. We're kind of coming up to an hour, so I won't spend too much time on this in this workshop. I will say, just to say that the scoring guide, if you score between 10 and 20, there is low focus on retention strategies. 21 to 30, moderate retention strategies in place, but room for improvement. And 31 to 50, strong retention strategies that support thriving, engaging workforce. Keep refining and maintaining your approach. All right. But again, for more personalized conversation, feel free to message me on LinkedIn, email me, or you can book a call with me as well. All right. Let me see. Okay. So let me see, since we have a few minutes left, what would make sense? Are you guys you have a hard stop at, do you have a hard stop at the hour, at the top of the hour? Just curious. Or do you have like an extra 5, 10 minutes afterwards? And it's okay if you want to catch the replay afterwards as well. No pressure, but um, maybe what I'll do is I will just, you do. Okay, Mary. No worries if you have to go. Um, this is some of the what I'm gonna do is, because I want to make this informative and educational, I want you to take something good with you. Um, Let me stop the share and then we'll kind of just um so here just to kind of wrap up a little bit. Um, there are three key factors influencing engagement and satisfaction. And so the workplace environment, we can put them in three different categories: workplace environment, career development, and the leadership impact. And I'm going to start at the bottom. So leadership impact with the last one. So how your leadership styles affects employee retention and the importance of trust, communication, and recognition. So the leadership impact, I mean, I don't know if you've ever left a job because maybe of an interaction with, a manager or something like that. But leadership can definitely have an impact in how you feel about your job, about the organization, about the product. It really has so much to do with your satisfaction overall. So what I worked with my clients is how can we bridge the gap? How can we build a strong relationship and a trust and communication where we feel more comfortable recognizing and celebrating wins with our employees, and we have a stronger team cohesion. And then career development. It's definitely about providing clear opportunities for growth and advancement, but it really is about bringing that career development focus into policy, into your strategy, into your almost your everyday, your culture, because um, people do want to be clear about what they do. They don't want to be confused, and they want to know what opportunities they have for when they are ready to take the next step. And then workplace environment, this is about creating psychological safety, what we talked about earlier in the workshop, about being okay with making mistakes and speaking up and fostering a sense of belonging and inclusion, right? Where people feel that they belong, that they have a purpose, that they have a sense of community and a strong sense of themselves. And then what I would say is that when we focus on those three factors, there are some proven strategies that we can use to enhance retention. And so, um, 4 proven strategies to enhance retention are building strong relationships, providing meaningful work and career growth, promoting employee well-being, and recognizing and rewarding contributions. And so one of the things that is huge, right, is how do we, and focusing specifically on employee well-being, is how do we balance work and life? Like what life balance is, it's so critical. And it sometimes becomes very difficult to do, or seems difficult to do in manufacturing, right? Because maybe someone needs to leave early, for a doctor's appointment, but you need that person on the line, right? And so how can we, work on having better training systems, where we have maybe cross training involved, where we have ways to, move people around. So if someone needs to leave early for an appointment, they can do that, and it's not so much of a hassle. And also, it's not just about finding a way to do it and making it possible by, up updating our operations. to support that, but it's also about our response to those requests. And that's where the leadership style really makes an impact. And not to say that, it's not always going to be easy to be flexible and do this or that, but it's about finding ways to give people options, right? And so if you say, for example, you have to work, on weekends, manufacturing companies do that. So how can we, if this is becoming a trend, what we're working many, many weekends, this is going to burn people out eventually. And so do we need to talk about a rotating schedule, a B staff, right? Do we need to look at ways where we can update our operations in a way that is sustainable for employees' well-being? And let me see. So the other thing that I want to encourage you to do is look at all the things that we talked about today and how can you craft a retention action plan where you can support your employees and focus on their well-being. And so I would say start with a 3-step action plan to improve retention. And then I want you to consider the following questions. I want you to consider what is one area where you would like to improve, whether that's career development, employee engagement, recognition, performance, and then what steps can you take to address this issue? And then how will you measure the success? And I want to encourage you to start very small because we have a tendency in the corporate world in general, but in manufacturing to sometimes do more, right? Do more and do it fast and do it really good and perfect it. And so I would say that I would take the approach of start small and just be consistent and focus on one thing that you would like to tackle so that you can really explore it well, so that you can bring other people into the conversation. And that way, that follow through as well becomes more manageable. So you're not stressing yourself out while you're trying to implement this. And of course, I would love to, help you and support you with that. So if you want to schedule a call with me, I have a booking link that I will post with the video. And then when I share it on the replay, I will share that link as well. So you can book a call. And for 1 hour, we can talk about, your 3-step action, and I can give you feedback and support as to how can we, bring that into a plan of, 30, 60, or 90 days, whatever makes sense for you. And then I can also help you in how can we measure the success of that as well. All right. So there is another exercise on the workshop a workbook as well. So if you look at the end of page 4, building psychological safety, and this is, I would say, a more mainstream topic that you might have seen with other followers and other experts talking about psychological safety. And so if you think of a recent challenge or conflict that one of your employees had or one of your managers brought up to you, you can reflect on how it was handled and then answer the following. So one question is, did team members feel safe to express their thoughts and concerns? So basically, did you notice that there were any hesitations or anything like, well, I don't want to say, I don't want to get in trouble, things like, I don't want to lose my job. If they make comments like that or show a lot of hesitation, or even notice like, visibly look nervous, those are red flags there that the psychological safety is low. And then the second question is, what could you do differently to foster more open and trusting communication next time, right? So maybe the start of the conversation was very abrupt, or maybe there were too many people involved. I've seen that where you have the manager, the team lead, the HR person, the employee involved, and it's kind of overwhelming, and it feels like too much pressure. So maybe is the length, where you had the meeting. There's many things that we can talk about, and how we can ensure that we are promoting psychological safety. And then also, I think sometimes, we think of promoting psychological safety when there's conflict, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can also be in a proactive way. So, what could you do differently next time to promote a more trusting communication? Is maybe there needs to be some touch points or more visits to different, teams or different team members before a conflict happens. So that way you already have that rapport, you have that trust with the employees. But again, definitely something that we can personalize, depending on what your concerns are with this and what you've tried. We can talk about that on a call. And so I think here we are, an hour into the workshop. Thank you so much for coming. I want to invite you to book a call with me. I have 3 spots left for one-on-one coaching this summer. So if you are interested in working with me on an individualized base, I have 3 spots open. So book a call with me, and I will see you on LinkedIn. I hope to see you again for my next workshop at the end of next month. But if I don't, I would love to hear, what you think about the workshop, how it applies to you, how it helps you, and, what are you wanting to implement for improving retention in the workplace. So thank you so much for coming, and have a good one.